Hello, Pong Stars, and welcome to the Rathole. This is your host, Commissioner Zack Eichten, with my wonderful and lovely co-host, team owner John Stevens. John, welcome to the program.
Thank you, as always. A little bit sadder this week than I have been in previous appearances, even though technically I had my best week score-wise. It was my first loss of the season, so good on you, Sam. I think Zach may have kind of jinxed me by talking about how good I was against Sam in the past.
Yeah, that's my bad on that.
So hopefully we'll avoid that going forward, but well done, Sam. You should feel good about yourself, maybe. And yeah, good to be here.
Yeah, it's great to have everybody listening in. I do want to, just before we get into the full recaps here, mention that the Pongstar Pick'em is alive and well, and just want to give a quick update on the scoring. Of course, this is in the database, so anybody can go look at it. It updates live on the website. Click that OneDrive link. You should be able to get access to it. We're on the Pick'em 2021 tab, of course. And I got to say, so far, boys, a lot of stinkers this year in picks. A lot of red on the board, especially this past week. All 10 people picked Noel in last week's Pick'em. Obviously, that did not go well for Noel. I will say almost everybody picked Zack, which apparently that was a really great pick. Who would have possibly thought that when you don't get 140 points scored on you, you have a better chance of winning?
Weird.
Yeah, very weird. But lots of red in the last board here. But quick update on scores. John, congratulations. You are actually tied right now with Sam in first place. Nice. Both of you are at 11 total points. Josh is in second total points with 10 on the board here. Coming in at another tie here is at 8 points, Lucas and Noel. Congratulations to both of you. Another weird that it's close matchups between the people that were playing against each other.
True.
Very strange. I'm coming in next with 7 total points. Which, yeah, it's fine. I'm 4 back. That's not a great spot to be in, but plenty of season left, 14 weeks of play left on this. Coming in next is Brennan with 6 total points, then Tony with 5, and then Thomas and Drew tied with 4 total points. Now I want to emphasize why that is. It's bad for Drew, but why it's extra bad for Thomas. Drew did not submit picks in week 2. So that's a big fat 0 in the week 2 column for Drew. So for Thomas to have the same number of points, they're obviously not looking great for the dog sniffers. This week was especially bad, only getting 1. Last week he only got 1. So let's see how we can pick it up from here, I would say.
Yeah, yikes. I mean, sounds like most of the league has picked more games incorrectly than correctly so far.
Yes.
So not good.
It has been a tough go, but I think we're potentially seeing a reshaping of people's opinions about individual teams right now. And I think going forward, we might start to see some names that don't typically get picked, getting some more nods in the pick'em.
Definitely.
But to that point, let's head on over to our recap for this week. All right, let's get into matchup number 1, which is the Gluten Freaks versus the Spring Chickens. The Freaks getting the first win here, and the Spring Chickens moving to 1-2 as well, with a pretty dismal performance without Dalvin Cook in the lineup here.
Yeah, and it's funny because, I mean, to be honest, your team, with the exception of Josh Allen and the Saints defense, really didn't go crazy.
Well, Austin Eckler.
Yeah, but, I mean, that's not crazy for him. Like, he's projected 16 points, scores 19. I mean, other than that, everybody else on your team was basically either at or below projections. So the Saints defense came through huge. So good pickup with them playing the matchup there. And then Josh Allen, obviously you're starting him every week, and he finally had a big week after his first 2 weeks weren't, anything special. So he definitely helped yourself out. And then looking at Brennan's team, We've talked before about the kind of boomer bust from Brennan, and frankly, he didn't really do either. He didn't completely bust this week, but he did have the lowest score out of anybody in the league. But 95 still isn't that bad. Definitely had a chance to win if maybe he played a different team, but happened to face yourself this week and just didn't put up that solid of a performance.
Yeah, I think it's my team, I will say, I think has been looked down on a little bit unnecessarily, just given an 0-2 start to the season. Obviously going up against some really tough teams. And yeah, finally having a team that didn't go bananas on me was helpful. I will say for Brennan, I think that if this is his bust, if we're looking at Brennan as the Mike Evans or the Tyler Lockett of fantasy football here, if his floor is 95 points, which is roughly what he got a week ago as well, that's a pretty solid floor. It's maybe not going to cut it for a win every week, but against certain teams, that's definitely a winnable score. I think Dak Prescott had a down game from what I was expecting him to have. As a result, of course, CD had a down game. Gronk not getting 2 touchdowns made a difference there. And then honestly, Hollywood Brown has been difficult to watch, just with how many drops he's having. But if he makes a couple more of those catches, that could have been a really solid score for Marquise Brown as well.
Definitely, yeah. I'm really surprised with Dak Prescott's play in particular. I think most people thought that, a lot of people were going into the season saying like, oh yeah, Dak's breaking the record. Like he's going to throw for 5,000 plus yards. Yep. Like he's going to go crazy. And with the exception of the first week, which wasn't, I think he scored like 27 or 28, but it wasn't absurd. And since then he's had 2, one really down performance and then one that was just pretty average for QB in the league. So I don't know. It was a tough choice that Brennan had to make between keeping him or Aaron Rodgers, but as of now, it's not looking great for the keep on Dak Prescott, but hopefully for Brennan's sake, he'll be able to turn it around.
Yeah, it's definitely tough. Brennan having Elijah Mitchell and Dalvin Cook out. Brennan had one of the highest percentages of max possible points scored this week. He maxed out at 109 points, even if he had started a perfect lineup. So points to Brennan on that. Like, even if I didn't start my max lineup, you wouldn't have been able to beat, that's always kind of nice to see. I feel like it's like, all right, well, you had a lot of injuries and stuff like that.
Out, it was always going to be tough this week for Brennan, but
maybe
he should have traded for Alexander Madison. He got about 20 points. Brennan would have been right there and would have had a much better chance at winning. So
shoulda, coulda, woulda.
Was one, but that was clearly a bad move by Brennan to not get Madison.
And hindsight is one for me on not starting Brandon Cooks, even though he's scored over 15 points every week. I am going to fix that. So
yeah, you got to think that Bobby Trees is coming out of the lineup this week for Brandon Cooks or one of them. Or
Julio. Someone's going to be taking a sit this week as we move forward. But let's get on over to our next matchup here, which of course is worse than trash versus the dog sniffers. Tony taking the win, moving to 2-1 over Thomas, who moves to 1-2 now on the year.
Yeah, I am absolutely terrified of Najee Harris after he got 19 targets as a running back.
Yeah.
Caught 14 of those passes and put up 20 fantasy points. So he put up 20 fantasy points without getting a touchdown. And he only had 40 rushing yards. So definitely seems like maybe Najee Harris is starting to come around. Now, he did play Cincinnati, who's not like a stellar team by any measure, but that's definitely a good sign for Tony. Tyler Lockett finally had his down week.
Yeah.
Only 5 points, but thankfully for Tony, again, he had Najee Harris. Stafford had a really good game. Clyde had a good game. Jefferson had a good game. So he's able to get production from other places and was able to come home with the win. But yeah, I don't know. I think I saw that Tony put Tyler Lockett up on the trade block. He's maybe starting to realize that it really was a fluke what happened in the first 2 couple of games, kind of like what happens every year. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets any action on that, because he does have other great receivers he can obviously start, or he would start over Tyler Lockett. And, Tyler Lockett's also vying for a position with DeAndre Swift for his flex spot. So hard to know how much longer Lockett will really be a starter on this side, but obviously not a bad player to have on the bench just in case you have an injury. So
yeah, for sure. I am wondering how Tony's feeling. I think I haven't verified this in the database yet. Just didn't have time before we started recording here. This might be Tony's first time being the top scorer on the week. And that's impressive, Tony. Congratulations on that. Certainly one of the few times that happens, even with, having a flex player that, could have been DeAndre Swift or Melvin Gordon in there instead, or Jamar Chase. Any of those guys could have been in there rather than Tyler Lockett and would have had an even higher score. Tony maxed out, I think, highest this week at 151.12 possible points this week.
Yeah, it is pretty funny that Tony scored the most points in the league in the week that really nobody had that good of a week.
Yeah.
And there was just a lot of parity throughout the league this week. Everybody's score was between 95 and 125. So we were all bunched together. Nobody really broke out. Nobody really had a terrible performance. So yeah, good for you for getting the top score this week, Tony, but it definitely wasn't anything special. I believe it was still probably less than what his projection was. I don't think really any team met their original projection. So
yeah, it was kind of a down week for sure. I do want to talk about Thomas though, and a surprising development late in the lineup setting process, but Mark Andrews on the bench, not the 2 tight end set this week.
Yeah, it didn't work out for him either because he left 13 points on the bench. Deebo Samuel kind of regressed a bit, like a lot of people thought he would. So it'll be interesting to see. I'm guessing he'll have Andrews back in the lineup next week. The guy that I'm particularly starting to get nervous for Thomas for is Allen Robinson.
Yep.
And I am glad that he is not on my team anymore. I do love Allen Robinson, but it seems like Matt Nagy and the Bears Matt Nagy seems like he has a vendetta out against the media and can't admit that he's possibly wrong for starting Andy Dalton over Justin Fields. And if you watched any of that game on Sunday, it literally looked like he was trying to lose.
Yeah.
Like he was just putting Fields in the worst possible positions. He had a whole game plan that was not even to any of Justin Fields' strengths. And I think he got sacked 8 times.
Yeah.
So I don't know, definitely very concerning for Allen Robinson, who I know Thomas was hoping would be that really solid wide receiver 2 this year behind Keenan Allen. So hopefully things in Chicago for Thomas's sake get kind of figured out on the offensive side of the football.
Yeah, I am also gonna press the panic button on one player in particular on this team. Ronald Jones, workhorse back, has totaled, let's see, how many points even is this?
Points.
Less than 5 points. Let's see, it's 5.2, but minus 0.6. So that I'm pressing the panic button on Ronald Jones. It seems as Leonard Fournette has totally taken the role, and any backup role has really gone to Giovanni Bernard this season. Bummer. That's a tough keep there. But looking at Thomas's team, not sure who would have kept instead, but definitely a tough guy to see riding the bench at this point in the season already.
Yeah, I think if Thomas wants really any chance at having success in the league this season, he's going to have to go out and get a running back. He's going to have to make a trade. I think we'll get into this later, but he does have obviously 2 really good tight ends. He's going to have to make a move with one of his better players and secure a running back because
Miles Sanders isn't cutting it.
Miles Sanders isn't cutting it. Chase Edmonds and then Rojo. And you can think all you want that you can win in this league without having a really good RB1, but it just frankly historically does not pan out. So I think Thomas really, like you said, needs to be hitting a panic button on his running backs and needs to go out and find one. So we'll see.
Yeah, let's move on to the next matchup here, which is yours. The Lac Platstas versus the Googled team names. a heartbreaker for the Plopses, losing the names 119.44 to 117.54. That second interception, did you get on Monday night there?
It was the difference. And, they had a little bit of garbage time, and Jalen Hurts was able to get one touchdown, and they even got the ball back. And I thought they might have a chance, but then they went 4 and out and turned the ball over on downs and didn't get the yardage that Jalen needed to get that extra 2 points for me to pull ahead of Sammer. But overall, like, I'm not that displeased with my team's performance this week. Actually, it was technically my team's best performance this season. I think I've had like 116, 115, and 117 points. So very consistent in terms of my overall score. The thing that I've really struggled with this season so far is getting a defense correct. Started with the Vikings because the Steelers had a tough week 1 matchup against Buffalo. And then I rode the Steelers the last 2 weeks to much disappointment. And even just like a 5 to 10 point performance from my defense this week would have gotten it done for myself. So I think I'm going to have to kind of rethink the strategy in terms of, sticking with one solid defense, which Pittsburgh just seems to not be that team this year, and might have to move to streaming defenses because right now that really has been the difference for my team. And, it just hurts even more when I look at the other side and Sam gets 19 points from the Broncos defense. So yeah, it's a tough one to swallow because I felt like I could have / should have won, but at the end of the day, it didn't work out. Sam didn't have a bad week by any means. And there were definitely opportunities for me to win with not a crazy performance from Kyler Murray. Like I was,
you're hopeful.
I was hopeful. Yeah. Seeing that Kyler only put up 18, I was like, okay, got a good chance. The one other thing that I just called back to was the Packers game. I obviously got a ton of production out of Devontae and a pretty good production out of Aaron Jones, but that not their last drive when they had the game-winning field goal, but the drive where they threw the touchdown pass, or Aaron Rodgers threw the touchdown pass to MVS, that one hurt. And if that touchdown went to Jones or went to Adams, that would have done enough for me as well. So again, not super displeased, but just a couple of things that didn't go right. And, everybody's got one in the loss column now. So
for sure, yeah. And looking at Sammer's team, did actually pretty well. I'm a little bit worried about the production out of Calvin Ridley.
Yes.
I think that is, he's right now wide receiver 25 in PPR formats. And he did get 11 targets and he caught most of them, but just the production is just not showing any tangible dividends right now.
The Falcons just stink. They're not
bad.
They beat the Giants because the Giants might be one of like 2 teams that stink even more, but they are not good. And Calvin Ridley is paying the price for it right now. Yeah. And, his production hasn't been that bad for like a run of the mill type of wide receiver, but for a guy that pretty much everybody had ranked top 5 amongst wide receivers going into the season, he is nowhere near what people want him to be at. So definitely a little nervy for Sam there.
Yeah, definitely a good pickup with their good play of Denver against the Jets. Denver 3-0, opponents 0-9, but that's all right. We love Teddy here and we wish him the best of luck in Denver. Let's move on to our next set of players here. And that, of course, is Randy's Donuts versus the Imposters. A heartbreaker loss for Noel. Watching Sunday Night Football, I was wondering aloud to myself, where is Kittle? Like, where is Kittle? He was pretty much missing for most of the game. And then right at the end, one big 25-yard catch was able to propel Lucas to a pretty narrow, but solid win over Randy's Donuts, who moved to 0-3.
Yeah, I mean, I think Noel is obviously probably very just annoyed with Christian McCaffrey obviously going out again to an injury. They didn't put him on IR, so it seems like he could be back relatively soon. But with the nature of his injury, and usually these like hamstring injuries just kind of keep persisting. We saw what it did to CMC last season. I think I would also be panicking if I was Noel.
Yep.
It's just not turning out this season. Like he and pretty much everybody in the league, I think with a pretty solid consensus, all had him ranked within our top 2 or 3 teams going into this season, and it's just not working out. So I'm not really sure, what exactly the problem is, other than now Christian McCaffrey being injured, but it's just like across the board, he's not getting the production from the players that he drafted and the players that he kept.
Yeah. I mean, especially, you think of Ayuk and his woes, and honestly the woes of the 49ers, how you can trust any of them or not in fantasy format. It's tough when like Sterling Shepard gets hurt. That's tough. In this case, Christian McCaffrey gets hurt. That's tough. Kyle Pitts, again, we just went over Atlanta. They stink. Joe Mixon, garbage. Went to put him in my lineup anyways, so that's on him. But the one player that I'm really worried about, a little bit pressing the panic button on, it's early, is Jonathan Taylor. Last week he played 48% of snaps, the week before 45, and then the first week, in theory, like the week that you've had the most time to prepare for, only played 55% of snaps. No touchdowns yet in the year. Not to say that he's not going to get one. I mean, they're up against Miami next week, so it should be a better matchup for him. Mm-hmm. But I am a bit worried about how they are choosing to use Jonathan Taylor in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I don't know. I think Jonathan Taylor will be okay, but that's kind of what I thought he would be. Like, I wasn't one of these people that was really high on Jonathan Taylor. If we had a redraft league and if I had like a late first round, early second round pick, I don't think I would pick him like most people were doing. Mm-hmm. Like in redraft leagues, he was consistently going in the first round, and I just personally wouldn't have placed that value on him, even as a Wisconsin Badgers fan. But yeah, I don't know. He's kind of just doing what I kind of expected him to do this season. The last 2 weeks are kind of down, and like you mentioned, no touchdowns. So, those last 2 weeks, if you put a touchdown into the equation, he's looking at like a solid performance, a little closer to his projection. So I don't think he's like too far off, but yeah, it's definitely not, the guy that Noel went out and traded for, frankly. So yeah. Hopefully he turns it around, because Noel's certainly going to need it now with his top running back being out.
And a quick Nyheim Hines check. Nyheim Hines currently averaging 10.1 points, right in that sweet spot of between 8 and 12, like I said he would be.
Yep.
So just we'll check in on that bet as the season progresses. But Lucas's team, let's talk about that. Saquon Barkley, is he back?
I don't think so.
No.
I mean, he played Atlanta, and
Atlanta
also stinks. Yeah, and also the Giants had like several injuries to wide receivers in that game, so they just kind of had to run the ball. I don't know. I think Cordero Patterson is maybe one bright spot on Atlanta, and Lucas is kind of taking advantage of it. He picked him up off waivers, and I kind of rolled my eyes when I saw so many people picking up Cordero Patterson across leagues, but he's actually been playing pretty well and putting up decent fantasy production, especially in the last 2 weeks. So good pickup there from Lucas. Kittle, like you had mentioned, didn't have like an outstanding game, but got the one big catch at the end and had enough receptions to get decent PPR scoring. So Lucas's team, I don't know. I'm still not like big on it, but he's doing enough to get by at the moment, and I guess that's really all I can probably ask for.
Yeah. Another bright spot on Lucas's team was on the bench, but I do want to just flag it, is Peyton Barber, who clearly took over the lead back role in the absence of Josh Jacobs, not Kenyon Drake, as was expected at the beginning of the year. Played 57% of snaps last week. And granted, it was against Miami, so take that into account. Up against the Chargers this next week. So, and Josh Jacobs may be back, but in Josh Jacobs' absence, I would say that Peyton Barber is definitely a player that could become a flex player on Lucas's team, especially with Juju out. Courtland Sutton might having to move into that true wide receiver position.
For sure. And one other thing that is a current bright spot for Lucas, but I'm a little bit nervous about, is Adam Felin.
Yeah.
He's wide receiver 4 right now, and that's largely because he has a touchdown in every single game so far. And the last 2 games, if he didn't have a touchdown, he'd be looking at pretty low single digit scoring. So be interested to see. I mean, I know that Adam Thielen throughout his career has been tremendous just catching touchdowns and has gotten a lot of his fantasy production that way. But you have to think at some point, eventually, he's not going to get the touchdowns. And when that happens, I think it's, he's going to put up a dud for Lucas's side, who can't really afford to have many duds. So
agreed. Hopefully Darrell Henderson's back though too. So
true.
That would be very nice. Let's head over to our last week's game of the week of the Gruesome Grinders versus Jacks on, Jacks off. The Grinders taking their first loss, and Josh and Lamar here were able to take the dub over the former roommate. I will say, just right off the top, kind of disappointing performances from 2 of the top 4 consensus quarterbacks in the league, I think, fantasy football wise. Kind of dud weeks for both of them.
Yeah, it was kind of a weird week for Mahomes and the Chiefs. I mean, first time the Chiefs have lost back-to-back games in the Mahomes era, which is interesting. And obviously, Tyreek Hill didn't have great production either. So It seems like those 2 things are kind of going hand in hand. I know when they played Baltimore made like a very concerted effort to just shut Tyreek down and let them beat them in another way. I don't know that this week the Chargers did as much to really just shut down Tyreek, but they definitely still kept him in check. And as a result, the Chiefs just, when you take that one piece away, they're just not nearly as explosive. And with that goes Drew's team. When he's not getting the production from Mahomes and Hill, it really hurts his side. And that was a big part of the reason why he lost this week.
Yeah, I think also just weird. I mean, it's weird matchup plays for Drew here. Tunyon only getting 1 target. I mean, he caught it. That's tough, weird matchup against San Francisco. Amari Cooper just not having to use receivers hardly at all in that game because they were just trusting Zeke in that game. So he only had the 4 targets. He caught 3 of them. And then the one weird matchup play that I was questioning Drew on was starting a defense that was playing against Tom Brady in Tampa Bay, when Tampa Bay has been very electric so far this year. The Rams ended up winning, but they gave up a lot of points to be able to do it. So I was definitely questioning that from Drew's side. Strange.
It'll be interesting too to see what Drew does with his receivers, because he has Prison Mike Williams on the bench with, I think right now Mike Williams is like either the 2nd or 3rd highest wide receiver in the league. So you got to think eventually he's going to make his way into the starting lineup. But when you look at the guys that he would have to be overtaking in Tyreek Hill and Amari Cooper and Mike Evans, I can understand why there's a little bit of hesitancy. I think I would probably at least personally start him over Mike Evans.
Oh, for sure.
But especially those other 2 guys, I don't know, even with how good Mike Williams has been, I just don't think I could ever start him over like a Tyreek Hill or Amari Cooper. So it'll be interesting to see if Drew, trades one of those guys so that he can put him in, or maybe he just tries to play the matchup game, but you can get burned on that pretty easily too. So
tough week for Josh too, and just choosing the right players as well.
It was really tough because James Robinson finally had a good week. He was on his bench, and that was the big one. Even though he got the win, that was just, for whatever reason, Urban Meyer just realized, oh shit, this guy's actually pretty good, and I can use him. I think throughout camp, he was just so used to using ETN that when ETN went down, he's just like, oh, the guy behind him must not be good. But that's just not true. James Robinson, very good running back. So he finally realized that and used him. And unfortunately for Josh, he wasn't in the lineup, but he was able to overcome it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, also Mike Davis against the Giants, good matchup play there. You would think be able to be. I've been a little disappointed in Mike Davis this year. I expected better out of him, but as we said many times so far today, Atlanta stinks. So not that surprised. Tough. Hope AJ Brown gets better as well.
Justin Tucker, MVP.
Justin Tucker, spectacular. But the real MVP here is, of course, my old dear friend Cooper Kupp. Used to be a lifelong freak. Was not that good when he got dropped. He was fine. Looking at his, he was fine last year.
Yeah, but he wasn't. I mean,
but this is outrageous.
2 years ago, I had him on my team for a good chunk of the season when he was playing very well. And then I traded him away, and that's kind of right when he took a downturn. And then last year, like, he was okay, but he wasn't anything special. But now with Matthew Stafford, he is just going off. I mean, you got to think at a certain point, defenses are going to pay a little bit more attention to him, and some of those targets and receptions are going to shift over to Bobby Trees. But
not yet.
as of now, Cooper Kupp has had more production basically in each of his individual games than Robert Woods has had in all three combined. So it'll be interesting to see if that trend continues or if more pieces kind of get involved in the offensive scheme as defenses start to pay a little bit more attention to Kupp.
Yeah. As the Bob Trees owner, hoping that happens soon. But let's head on over now to our fun fact of the week. All right, this fun fact, we're looking at last year. We looked at teams that started 0-3 during the fun fact, or sorry, 3-0, I should say, during the fun fact, and found out that no team that had ever went 3-0 missed playoffs. I came extremely close to disproving that last year. Ended up making playoffs. We know the results; they speak for themselves. But let's take the inverse of that: teams that start 0-3, and see how frequently those teams are able to overcome deficits and make it into playoffs. In the keeper era, so starting in 2019, 3 total teams, besides Noel's team this year, have gone 0-3. That is John and the Pickle Ricks. No, Spooning Loons in 2019. Pickle Ricks was the year we don't talk about.
Yeah.
Spooning Loons in 2019, you went 0-3. Lucas in 2020 went 0-3. And then Tony in 2019 also went 0-3. Of those, John, you are the only one of the 3 of them to have made playoffs. So 33% chance of making playoffs after going 0-3. If we take the non-keeper era into account, that does turn into 4 out of 6. I will say all 3 years, everybody made playoffs. So that doesn't really mean anything. It means nothing. But in the keeper era, of course, 1 out of 3 chance of if you make the right moves and keep putting the work in, you still have that opportunity to make playoffs here. So good luck to Noel with that.
Yeah, it'll be, I mean, I know at least Noel texted me basically saying that he was waving the white flag, going into rebuilding mode, interested. And if I had any interest in some of his top players so he could kind of rebuild, I think that is very premature. I don't know if I was like the only person. I can imagine he probably made that same offer to many other teams, if not all teams. And so I think it's a little premature. I mean, like we just talked about earlier, McCaffrey's not on IR. I think he's probably going to come back a little bit, hopefully, in the next couple of weeks here. And I don't know. I just don't feel like it's rebuilding time. And even if it was rebuilding time, Noel already has a crazy amount of picks next season. Like he already has 3 first rounders. So I don't really know what he's after if he's like rebuilding other than picks. So I'm a little confused. I think it's just too early. As I proved in previous seasons, it can be done. He just either, I guess what I would say is like last season, he hard panicked and made a lot of trades and a lot of them didn't work out. Yeah. So maybe this season he just, rides the storm out and then comes out on the other side and maybe his players start playing better because obviously just because your players haven't played well in the first 3 weeks doesn't mean that they're not going to turn it around at some point. So I definitely wouldn't be throwing in the towel. I would just, with the talent that he still has on his team, I would still be, maybe trying to make a couple of smaller moves, but there's definitely room for him to still make the playoffs and get some wins throughout the season.
For sure. All right, let's bring it back in here. And we're going to look at, John and I are starting a new segment here, trade talks.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of talking about what trades have happened, because not that many this year, I'm kind of disappointed so far in the boys. But what trades, what positional targets, particularly, teams should be looking at trying to make right now. And we're going to start at our 10th ranked team right now. 10th in standings, I should say, not 10th ranked. Randy's Donuts.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's a couple that come to mind for me for pieces that Noel could move. I know that I just said that I think he should probably kind of ride it out, but obviously Christian McCaffrey is always a guy that can be traded.
Yep.
I'm not sure his value will ever be higher than it is like right now. And it kind of sounds dumb because he just got injured, but if he isn't the same player when he comes back from that injury, obviously his value is just going to go down and down and down. So if Noel doesn't want to take that risk, there are many teams, I'm sure, which would be willing to take that risk and trade for Christian McCaffrey. The other one is Justin Herbert. I don't know. I got one guy in particular. His name's Tony Townsend. I know that Tony loves Justin Herbert and probably would like to have him back on his team. Maybe this week with the way that Matthew Stafford played, he might not be feeling quite as strongly about moving him. But I don't know. If I was Noel, I'd probably be poking around Tony to see if he could, trade him Herbie and get something back in return.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think that right now, if I am Noel, the one piece of this puzzle that seems to be in most desperate need of a solid player, it's a wide receiver. So as Noel is looking at potential trading partners, a wide receiver 2 would look really nice on this squad. I just don't trust Brandon Ayuk anymore after the shenanigans that has happened. Ryan shenanigans.
I think that's
tough.
Yeah, I think Ayuk is a good stash play. Like I certainly wouldn't trade him away
if
he was on my team. I think that as the season progresses, his role is going to increase, but Noel needs to win now and to get back into this thing. And so, yeah, I totally agree. He needs to fill that kind of void that Ayuk has left behind. So,
yeah, absolutely. So let's move on here to number 2 on our list here. In 9th place, the Dog Sniffers. We kind of touched on it earlier. It's running backs, right? That's what this team needs.
It's what this team has frankly always needed.
Yeah.
And the piece that Thomas is going to have to move to do it is either going to be one of his 2 tight ends or probably Keenan Allen.
Yeah.
I wouldn't advise him. I mean, if it was my team, I would not be trading Keenan Allen because he's like kind of the lone consistent bright spot on this team. But I think Thomas really needs to move one of his 2 tight ends. Obviously, he's almost never entertaining the idea of trading Kelsey. I think rightfully so. But Andrews is just coming off a better week, maybe turning the corner and going to have a few more better weeks here in his near future. And if that stock starts to rise, it might be time for Thomas to include him and one of his lesser running backs in a trade for a better running back or a more consistent running back that he can get production from.
I'm just going to throw it out here. Kyle Pitts and Joe Mixon for Mark Andrews. Reasonable?
No.
No. Potentially?
No.
Potential. Throwing it out there, you boys talk it out, see if you can come to some sort of arrangement.
I like it.
Let's move on here to our team in 8th place, the Spring Chickens. It's running backs again with Dalvin Hurts and Elijah Mitchell up. That's the position I'd be targeting right now. Brennan has 5 total running backs on this team, and his RB3 is J.D. McKissick, who he had to play. McKissick isn't a terrible play if you have to do it. He has in the past, sniped some touchdowns. But yeah, you don't want that to be your RB3.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I think like as long as Dalvin comes back relatively soon, he does have a good solid combo of Carson and Cook. I would say, as we've talked about before, and Brennan maybe has hopefully learned now, he really should handcuff one of or both of those guys.
Yeah.
I believe he just needs to do it because like you see this week, like it just hurts him too hard when Dalvin's out and Madison just literally puts up the same production. So I don't know. It may be him having to overpay a bit, but I think it's a worthwhile move just because when Cook goes down, this team just is going to struggle. There's no way around it, especially when they don't have Madison. So I'd be working on the handcuffs. And I mean, he has a couple of handcuffs on his roster that he could trade to other teams. So,
for sure.
JD McKissick and Dylan, who would both be handcuffs for players that I have. So maybe we can talk, Brennan.
As we are literally talking about Brennan's team, Brennan Swan has just updated some player nicknames a few seconds ago.
Wow.
AJ Dillon moves to Dilly.
I like that.
Elijah Mitchell is just Eli. Interesting.
That's okay. One that I'm not liking is the Red Rocket for Chris Godwin.
Yeah.
That just grosses me out.
Yeah, that's tough. I do like John David McKissick. That does make me laugh. That's a good one.
Is that his actual name?
I have no idea. Fish Legs is good. Obi-Wan Jacoby. That's a Google team name if I've ever heard it. Absolutely. But it's a fun stuff, Brennan. Good job, bud.
Fun fact, JD stands for Joshua Dobby McKissick.
So he wasn't even right.
Not even close.
All right, let's get over to the gluten freaks here. John, I'd love to hear your diagnosis on my team.
Yeah, I mean, there's one guy in particular that I would be trading if I was you, Zach, and it is Julio. Old Bones Jones. I think it's time to move on. The only problem with that is I don't know who you're going to find to buy because his stock is pretty low right now. Maybe after next week, since AJ Brown is going to be out, maybe Julio will have a better game. Stock rises a little bit. Maybe that's the time to trade him. But I don't know. I think I kind of called it going into the season. I just think that AJ Brown, as long as both of them are playing, AJ Brown's going to be the primary guy. And Julio just hasn't really put up the production that we're used to seeing him put up back when he was in Atlanta.
Yeah.
Part of it's just age, he's just getting older. So, but that definitely, if of the guys that you have on your roster, he's definitely the one that I would be wanting to move the most.
Walk down memory lane. Keeper deadline's coming up. I'm going, man, do I keep Julio or do I keep Cooper Kupp? I want both these guys on my team again.
That is really tough.
And I go, you know what? No, Brennan is definitely not keeping Bob Trees. He's the better receiver, quote unquote, in the Rams offense. I'm going to keep Julio because I think I have a better chance of getting Kupp in the draft. And then Tony Townsend waltzes in and takes Tyler Lockett instead of Bob Trees like he was supposed to. And then I'm sitting here going, oh, Bob Trees. And then I goofed it. But I agree with your assessments that, a backup wide receiver 2 would be nice. I would also love another solid running back. But, I think my team is fairly balanced right now. I don't have any studs. That's the problem. So.
Yep.
Got to move on from that. Let's go into number 6 here. Kukak with the Imposters. What's your read on this team?
Yeah, I don't know. It's tough because the guys that I would be looking to move on Lucas's team are so important to his team. Russell Wilson is one that always comes to mind in terms of trading just because he's kind of doing the Russell Wilson thing and playing really well early in the season. Obviously, this week against the Vikings, he didn't have like a crazy good performance, but he was still efficient and still put up good yardage, just didn't really get the touchdowns just because the Vikings, played pretty well defensively against him. But I think Russell Wilson is always a guy that if you can move him kind of early to midway through the season after he kind of peaks, if he does what he historically does, you're going to get good value out of him.
Yep.
And then he's going to fall off the face of a cliff and do
Disappear.
nothing for whoever you trade him to. So maybe a little premature on the Russell Wilson move, but definitely something to keep in mind for Lucas.
Yeah, Lucas, I think right now is probably the time, if he is ever going to do it, sell on Saquon Barkley after a solid performance against a bad team. This is the time to sell. If he can do it, that would be who I would go for Lucas's team. And if he can get a couple of good running backs in place of somebody who has great potential but hasn't historically been able to live up to it, now might be the time to do it. But let's move on to the Google team names here, number 5 in the rankings. Sammer, I don't know how I feel about Sam's team. I'm going to be honest. I think that right now he's playing Javonte Williams here, which I don't think is a bad play necessarily. I just think it's early. So if I am Sam, I am looking for a third running back that is good to be able to play instead of a rookie who is definitely time sharing and has been time sharing with a guy who's put up more production and against really bad teams. And I'm worried that this 11.7 from last week isn't going to continue yet.
Yeah, I agree with the assessment there. I think the running backs are definitely an issue for Sam. I think Alvin Kamara has kind of done what people expected him to do, which is regress a bit this season. He finally, this week, basically met his projection, but in the first 2 weeks, first week he missed by a little bit, second week he missed by quite a bit. And so it's pretty clear that Alvin Kamara, with Jameis Winston as the quarterback, no longer Drew Brees, he's not really the threat that he once was. So I don't know. There's probably some buyers out there for Alvin Kamara. I know there's still people that are pretty big on him. Somebody that comes to mind is Tony, maybe. Like maybe he can trade Alvin Kamara and get one of Tony's, 4 young running backs or 3 young running backs and then another piece in like a wide receiver or something. But yeah, I don't know. The depth for Sam at running back is definitely a concern for me.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's move on to our 4th ranked team or 4th place team, the Lock Plopstas. John, I got to give you your assessment here. I think what you're really missing is a solid wide receiver 2 here. You are absolutely flush with playable running backs, and you're starting Kenny Golladay for the Giants, who are one of a few teams that stink worse than Atlanta.
Yeah, you are correct. I will say I don't mind my guys that are vying for the wide receiver 2 position. The problem was this week they were like all injured.
Yeah.
Obviously Antonio Brown, COVID list. Also, Deontay Johnson out this week. So I was put in a really tough spot. I really like both of those guys, and I even like Kenny Golladay. I'm kind of confused why New York's not using him more in that offense. But
absolutely.
But I do agree. And I have engaged in some trade talks throughout the week to try to start looking for a better option. I also have Christian Kirk on my team, who I picked up off of waivers last week or a couple of weeks ago, and I'm liking him. I don't know. I think he is slowly kind of emerging as that wide receiver 2 in probably one of the top 3 offenses in the league in Arizona. Yeah. So I don't mind having him on my team. And if he can continue to consistently put up production, I will definitely think about putting him into the lineup. But I think it's a little premature to start putting him in there, quite yet. But the guy that, I've kind of been exploring moving in order to get a wide receiver is Giblet, my boy. So I like, the thing is, I like having 3 very solid running backs on the team. I don't necessarily think it's the play to start a running back in the flex spot. I think that for consistency's sake, it just seems a little safer to start 3 wide receivers. So if I can trade Giblet away and get another really solid wide receiver in exchange for him, then I feel like I have the opportunity to improve my team's chances.
I think that is definitely a possibility here as we move on to our third place team of Jacks on, Jacks off, with Josh Plingo here. I had a tough read on this team. I think that with AJ Brown in good shape, don't really need another receiver with Cooper Kupp and Scary Terry, but right now I think that Josh could be hurting a little bit going into next week if he had. Holy, you hear that?
Mm-hmm. Next week,
Josh could be hurting a little bit here going into next week without having AJ Brown in there. I think that right now either a solid running back or a solid receiver would really help this team boost the production that it already we know it can do.
Yeah, it's just the flex spot. I actually love Josh's team, to be completely honest.
Great team.
Now that Zeke has had a good game, I'm still a little bit skeptical of Zeke, but if Zeke and Robinson just can put up like average production or what they're supposed to do, the points for this team are going to come from the wide receiver spot.
Yeah, for sure.
Obviously, Cooper Kupp has already done that. AJ Brown, I think once he gets healthy, like he will start to put up good games again. And Terry McLaurin, like, I don't know, he hasn't really been outstanding this season, but with the amount of targets he gets and the lack of competition, I think he's just bound to be that guy on Josh's team that's just like a steady 8 to 10 point guy. And then he gets the, breakout performances from the other two receivers. So I really like the setup that Josh has right now. Honestly, I don't know if I would even make any moves if I was him.
Yeah.
I think I would probably just kind of stay set with what he's got.
All right, let's move on to second place team with worse than trash. Tony Townsend. This may be the highest he's ever been in standings. So congrats, Tony, on that. If I'm Tony, I am right now shopping J.K. Dobbins to somebody with an open IR spot. That is what I'm doing for sure. Clyde, Najee, you have Swift, you have Diggs, you have Jefferson, you have Lockett. Like, you have enough keepers. You're not keeping J.K. Dobbins next year. I don't see any world in which that is happening. And what he's doing is taking an IR spot when he could be doing that on somebody else's team and get good value for him before people realize that who knows what's going to happen with Tyson there, or Gus coming back, or the infinite number of other running backs that they signed. Now's the time to trade J.K. Dobbins to somebody who wants to take a chance long term.
Yeah, I don't think so. The guy that I would trade if I was Tony is Clyde. Clyde sucks. He's not getting, I don't know, he's good, but he's
fine.
He's not getting the opportunities. I think Kansas City I saw that they have the least target share to running backs out of anybody in the entire league at like 7%.
Yeah.
So he's not getting any targets, which we all know kind of sets the floor for running backs in terms of having consistent play. So, if I had Tony's team, it'd be very obviously Najee and DeAndre Swift as my running backs, and then just go with 3 wide receivers. Like, he has good wide receivers.
Mm-hmm.
I would be moving Clyde 100% because Clyde will definitely be a starter on different teams, but I just really don't see how Clyde can be a starter on Tony's team with the way that he's currently been producing, and then looking at the other guys that he has available to fill into that flex spot.
For sure. All right, moving on to Drew Mahowald. The only plug here is that he needs, if he can get a better tight end, he should go get one. I don't see any other position where Drew is struggling. A little bit of running back.
Yeah,
but
running back 2 is definitely, this week he benefited from having Madison, but obviously we know that's not going to be a normal thing. And so when looking at the depth chart, he's really struggling at running back 2. So I think he definitely needs to make a move for another running back. And he has tons of wide receivers
that he's never going to play
with. Exactly. We already talked about Mike Williams. He's got Odell Beckham, who just came back and had a good game. Corey Davis, who frankly hasn't played well in the last couple of weeks, but had a huge week 1. And then he's got like his actual guys that he was planning on putting in the lineup regularly in Amari Cooper and Tyreek Hill. So I think
he's got some pieces.
Yeah, he's got tons of pieces to move in order to get a solid running back 2 on his team. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see if he's able to get something done.
All righty. Well, that is going to conclude trade talks here. Let's get over into previews real quick and just the number one guy on each team that we are watching this week. And we are starting off with the Gluten Freaks versus the Lock Plopstas. On my team, the guy to watch is going to be Austin Eckler versus Las Vegas. For me, that's going to be a critical matchup in order to secure a win here.
Yes, I don't disagree with you there. I think the guy that I'm watching a little bit closer on your team, though, as I kind of always am, is David Montgomery.
Yeah.
Like we kind of talked about, the Bears offense stinks. And if David Montgomery in that Bears offense can't put up a good performance against Detroit, I think it is very worrisome. So I'm expecting him to play well this week. And then the guy on my team that I'm watching is Jalen Hurts. I like watching him a lot because he is a good player, and I was a little bit disappointed with the interceptions this week. So I'm looking for a big redemption against Kansas City. I'm hoping that he comes to play, but I am very terrified that he could also just do nothing because Kansas City is going to be playing very angry coming off of back-to-back losses.
Yeah. Guy I'm watching on your team is if he stays in the lineup, Kenny Galladay.
He will not be.
Okay. Well, then I will not be wasting my time talking about him. It is going to be whether or not Christian Kirk can play well against the Rams defense here. Rams defense is going to be, I'm assuming he's the next guy up of right now.
And
we'll see.
Christian Kirk may see a lot of opportunities with your boy Dean getting shut down by
everybody.
Jalen Ramsey. So I don't mind the play of Christian Kirk this week, especially against your team. I think if that is the guy I go with, that'll definitely be the biggest matchup.
That'll be fun to watch
between the two guys.
For sure. Let's go to former roommates here, Brennan Swan and Lucas Lawrenson, the Spring Chickens versus the Impastas.
The best of roommates.
Of course, they got to watch for Brennan Swan, Dalvin Cook. If he plays, great match. If not, he's going to be in a lot of trouble there.
Yeah, I'm looking at Brennan's lineup right now, and he currently has Jacoby Myers in. If he does in fact play, he will definitely be the one I'm watching the closest because I know I wouldn't be feeling very confident about starting him in my lineup, even though he has had fairly good production last week, but the first 2 weeks didn't do much, and New England's just not a team that throws the ball a ton, so I'll definitely be watching him closely. And then on Lucas's team, like I kind of mentioned earlier, I'm watching Adam Felin. I'm expecting eventually he's going to have a regression and not get a touchdown, and I'm interested to see if that is, the one that breaks Lucas.
Yeah.
Sorry, Thomas.
I'm watching Juju. The Pittsburgh Ben stinks. He is. I have no idea what's going on in Pittsburgh, but I'm worried about everybody involved except for Najee. And
I would bet a substantial amount of money that Ben Roethlisberger is currently playing his last season in the NFL.
Yeah, there's no way.
I don't see any way how he's going to be able to play in the NFL again next season.
No, not with this current level. Matchup number 3 here, we got the Google team names versus Jack's on, Jack's off. Over here, I'm watching Javonte Williams against Baltimore on Sam's team. That is going to be this is the first real threat team, I think, that Denver has had to face in Baltimore. And seeing how rookie running back goes up against them, it's still in a timeshare, is going to be questionable for me.
For sure. I'm watching Alvin Kamara this week. I think this is the first real week where I'm feeling that Alvin Kamara can really go nuts because he's playing the Giants. I'll be interested to see if he does go crazy because historically Alvin Kamara has that ability to go really big, and this season it doesn't really seem like he's been able to do that. So if he's not able to do it against the Giants, I think we have officially seen the last of, breakout Alvin Kamara performances.
For sure. Josh's team, I'm looking at James Robinson against Cincinnati. Will Robinson, A, make the lineup on a Thursday night game? And B, if he does, I mean, Najee had pretty good points against Cincinnati. We'll see if Robinson can get the same usage going into this week.
Yeah, I think the guy that I'm going to be looking at on Josh's team for the foreseeable future is Cooper Kupp. I'm just very curious to see if he can truly keep up his production. It's not like Cooper Kupp's been getting an absurd amount of targets or anything. It's not like he's getting 15 to 20 targets. He's putting up his production on like 10 targets a game. So it seems like his pace is maintainable, but I do have doubts that he's actually going to maintain it. So definitely be watching him closely.
Yeah, all right. Let's move over into the next matchup here, which is Randy's Donuts versus the Dog Sniffers, which is definitely going to be pretty great matchup here. Guy I'm looking at on Noel's team is going to be Jonathan Taylor. I've been skeptical now for a little bit, but he's been facing up some pretty tough defenses. Let's see how he does against Miami.
Yep, I'm watching Pitts. I think that it's really kind of getting to make or break time for Kyle Pitts. Atlanta actually does have a really high target share to the tight ends. Unfortunately, the tight end that the passes are going to for some reason isn't Pitts. So I'll be interested to see if Pitts can continue to develop as a rookie and get more targets. Yeah,
for sure. Over on Thomas's team, I am watching just what happens in the flex spot, see how Thomas reacts to getting burned with not playing Mark Andrews. And then as a result, of course, watching Mark Andrews play against Denver, see how they can play against what seems to be a fairly tough defense.
Definitely. The guy that I'm looking at is Debo on Thomas's team. And interestingly enough, he is playing Noel, who has Ayuk, and Ayuk currently in the lineup. So I think that matchup will be really interesting to watch to see if Debo continues to be more of that number one guy, and Ayuk, it'll be interesting to see if he's able to get more involved in the offense again this week.
For sure. I do want to just flag real quick that I did forget to mention that we do have a traveling trophy on the line in the Josh versus Sam. We have the golf ball whacker guy, which the golf ball whacker guy is currently held by Sam. Sam won from week 5 of 2020 when Sam was able to pretty handedly trounce, then named not trading Lamar. So we'll see how that goes in this upcoming game. Mm-hmm. Our last matchup, though, is our game of the week, introducing a new traveling trophy for our only 2 boys that did not have one, which is Tony Townsend and Worse Than Trash versus the Gruesome Grinders and Drew Mahold, where they have the newly named Bowling Man traveling trophy, a throwback to Bowling Club. And Tony's team here, I am looking at Najee Harris as my number one guy I'm looking at. He started slow against Buffalo, then played Las Vegas and Cincinnati. Tougher defense in Green Bay. We're going to see how he's able to keep up there.
Yeah, I'm really interested in Jamar Chase on Tony's team. He has had he has 4 touchdowns already this season, similar to Adam Felin. I'm just kind of wondering if that type of touchdown production is going to, stay up there. I'm also interested to see if Chase is even in the lineup, because that would mean he's starting him over Lockett. So if he is in the lineup, I'll be very interested to see if Jamar Chase is able to get in the end zone again. And then on Drew's side of things, I'm looking at good old Bob Tonyan on the Green Bay Packers. Coming off of his 1 reception week last week, you got to think he's going to get a little more production. Although I will say Robert Tonyan has gotten a lot of his production from touchdowns in the past. So it's definitely a risky play for Drew, and I think he knows that. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets the production out of him this week.
For sure. I'm looking at Mike Williams. If he makes the lineup, I think that this is, it's a riskier play for sure over the other 3 guys on up right now for Drew's team here. But Mike Williams currently number 2 wide receiver in both standard and PPR formats. Yeah, you gotta see when it actually is gonna either crash or when Drew's gonna take advantage of it.
If I had him on my team, I could I would be so hesitant to start him this week because it just feels like he can't possibly put up another good week.
But he's definitely going to if you don't. So you're
screwed if you do, screwed if you don't.
Absolutely. All right, folks, that is going to wrap it up for this week. Thanks for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.